listening to Community Forum on KCCC 930 AM, sponsored by Eddy County, honoring God, country, and family, thriving with industry since 1889.
Thank you for listening to Community Forum. My name is Johnny Chandler. I'm the owner of KCCC 930 AM, the host of Community Forum. With me today is Paul Gessing. As many listeners know, Paul Gessing is the president of the Rio Grande Foundation, a nonpartisan think tank that, in my opinion, has the best interests of New Mexicans in mind. In general, that's the goal. From what I learned about your organization, Paul. So give us your introduction, start us off, and I think we're going to talk about the legislative session. We are pre-recording this. It airs. The session starts on January 20th, the day after Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and so we are airing this on January 20th, right? Basically when the governor's speaking. So instead of listening to the governor, you should be listening to us. So, Paul, how you doing, Paul? What do you got?
Well, thanks, Johnny. And in recent years with this governor, the State of the State address is usually started quite a bit later than the supposed start time of noon. So you may be able to do both if you really want to. But briefly, I run the Rio Grande Foundation. We're a nonpartisan public policy research foundation. You can call us a think tank. We look at New Mexico economic and education and constitutional policies. We put them under the microscope. We look for best practices, worst practices from other states, and we try to make recommendations to policymakers to do better by New Mexico. Unfortunately, given the governor and her ideological persuasion, the legislature, it's tough sledding these days, but this should be an interesting 30-day session. I think there's some interesting opportunities out there for those of us who haven't really been thrilled with the direction New Mexico's been going in recent years.
Right. So 30-day session, right? Every other year it's a 30-day session. And remind our listeners, but 30-day sessions means that the governor sets the agenda, correct?
It's a budgetary session. It's obviously very quick. And yes, the governor does have a great deal of control over the agenda. It does happen to be the governor's swan song, so to speak. She is a lame duck. So I don't know why it's a swan song and it's a lame duck, but that's not for me to decide. It's her last legislative session, unless, as she very well may, she decides to call a special session at some point. But her political capital is getting pretty low at this point because she's on her way out the door.
Now, she's called a special session just about every year since she's been governor, correct?
Yeah, I think she's had 7 or 8 over the time she's been in office, 7 years.
7 or 8 over 7 years.
Of course, COVID was probably inevitable that we had a special session or two. She, of course, just had 2 this fall, which were pretty much completely unnecessary. The legislature didn't think much of her crime special session last summer. So she's got a mixed bag when it comes to calling special sessions. And I quite frankly, don't think the legislature will have much appetite for what she wants to do if a special session were to be called in the wake of the 30-day session. So what are we looking at? Well, first and foremost, it's a budget session, so we might as well talk about the budget. The governor put out a inflated, very, I think, spending intensive, especially considering we've gone up 80% in the last 7 years in terms of spending. She further wants to ratchet things up to $11.3 billion. The legislature, they put out their own budget. They're only going up to 11.1, and there's a few components of the legislature's budget that are better than the governor's from our perspective. One is the governor decided suddenly out of the blue to do free childcare. We, of course, can talk about Minnesota and what's going on up there and some of the nuances, but free universal childcare, it's already given to folks making 400% or less of the federal poverty level. That's about $128,000 for a family of 4. But then in November, because the governor acted without legislative approval, she just started the program on her own. I think that's questionable in terms of its constitutionality, but that here we are. She still does need the legislature to make this a kind of permanent program. Well, she added $160 million to her budget for it. the legislature added $14 million for it. So a fraction, less than a tenth. And there's, I think, real questions as to whether the legislature would go along with that free childcare. Now, just to be candid, the whole program, it costs $450 million for its existence currently. The program that exists before November 1st, it's going to cost another $400 million to make that universal. So a total of $850 million a year. Federal dollars are a component of that, but we're really talking a lot of early childhood care, permanent fund money, and then, of course, some general fund money. And that's what we're debating in this session, whether that general fund money will be used to make this a universal program. And it does appear the legislature has concerns, both sides of the aisle.
Yeah. So the question on universal childcare, which is exactly, I think, maybe the big money topic this session for sure. And then maybe even the one topic I could see her calling a special session for if it's not actually taken care of. When you try to think of like one was a crime session, right? Special session. One was a marijuana special session. You know, these high priorities of her, she makes sure to call a special session if it's not taken care of. Sometimes she's been successful, sometimes she hasn't, right? So you said we already have this program in place for families of four making less than like $120 some odd thousand a year.
Right. 128,000. Yeah, that was in place before November 1st, but then she was able to do it by herself.
Right.
Temporarily starting on November
Exactly.
1st.
And so this, I guess this is getting to my point, is in like the percentage of New Mexico population based on the math of how much money they'll need to fund universal child care moving forward. It's half the population was already receiving free child care, like already receiving, at least half the population was, if not more. And when you look at the 400% below the poverty level of 128 and that math that I don't really understand, and knowing the state of New Mexico very, very well, just like you do, we have a tremendous amount of people that all in families that have already qualified for that universal child care. So do you feel like the addition, like the extra 50% of the population is going to make that big of a difference? Is that like worth the investment? I mean, you know?
Well, I don't think this is about actually making a difference for New Mexico families. I know that's going to shock and amaze you that a politician is not doing something to actually drive better outcomes. I think the governor, and I wrote this in an op-ed a while back, I think she is looking for a legacy. I think she, over the holidays, may have been like Ebenezer Scrooge, visited by the ghost of Christmas future. And she didn't like what she saw in terms of her legacy or lack thereof. We're dead last in education under her watch. We've gotten worse, significantly worse at the K-12 level. The pre-K program hasn't moved the needle at all, as I said it would not. CYFD is a complete and total disaster area under this governor. It's been a problem for a long time, but it's certainly gotten worse under Lujan Grisham. And so, you know, this is somebody who claimed when she was starting out that she was going to really move New Mexico in a better direction for children and families. And it's gone totally the opposite direction. So I don't think she's really doing this to make things better for New Mexico families as a starting point. And then let's talk a little bit about Minnesota real quick. So the federal government has this program in place over the holidays. A blogger, YouTuber named Nick Shirley went around to various providers, predominantly around the Somali community up there, and found that they were not open, that these were not facilities meant for children, that there were real problems. Well, this is a federal-only program. The federal government does pour money into this. In Minnesota, it's 150% of the federal poverty level, so much, much lower than New Mexico already was before the governor expanded it. There's also copays. As we know from going to the doctor, copay means that you have some skin in the game. Although a Biden-era rule, and this was specifically discussed in a recent Santa Fe, New Mexican article, the Biden-era rule allowed these child care centers, I should say, not schools, to base their numbers, their financial, what they got from the federal government on enrollment numbers, not on the number of kids who actually attended. And if that wasn't enough to drive a fraud tractor trailer through. Nothing really is. I mean, it's easy to say, oh yeah, we estimate 50, 45, whatever number of kids. And then maybe you have 2, 3, 5, 10, 0 in the actual program. And so unless somebody's really checking on the program itself from presumably the federal government, not the state of Minnesota, and soon New Mexico, you're going to start to have fraud issues. So 22,000 kids in Minnesota were on that program. 33,000 were already on New Mexico's program before the governor switched it. And Minnesota's just under 3 times the size of New Mexico population-wise. So that is another factor here. I think Minnesota and what went on and has gone on is going to give legislators some second thoughts. But let me be clear, it is what we're doing, or what the governor has done in New Mexico, was far more aggressive, far greater in terms of its financial impact than anything that's been going on in Minnesota. At least, the potential is there, unless, in addition to finding slots available, which is going to be challenging, and opening it up in New Mexico to people of higher means, could actually reduce opportunities for lower income families. Because who's going to be more educated? Who's going to be more savvy online? Who's going to be, able and willing to fight for those last slots? It's going to be people who have the means and the time to do these things, not the low income folks. So there's so many just ridiculous aspects to all of this that the governor has put forth, and why she's doing it. It's really clear to me that this is more legacy building and politics than anything else.
Well, she certainly did get a lot of positive national publicity from this announcement. There's no question about
Indeed.
that. I even think Fox News gave her, I don't know if they gave her a compliment, but she certainly got on Fox News for it, which is, considering their style of news, you'd be surprised that when I watched that, it was a little bit positive. So good for her, I guess, if that was what her goal was. But then I would say, just like so much else that she's instituting, EV mandates, stuff of that nature, really the rooster doesn't come home to roost until she's gone and out of office on these things.
Absolutely. And I'll just say that national media knows so little about New Mexico that it is sometimes physically painful for me to watch news stories or read news stories about this state. And it does transcend ideological lines. Yeah, liberal media outlets may be somewhat worse and more willing to just say that whatever new government program is going to be the cat's meow. But I've been interviewed myself for Fox on a story relating to the film program, and they clearly did not understand what was going on. So we're just a state that flies below the radar. People in other, from New Mexico go to other states and they show their ID, and people are like, well, you can't use pesos here,
Right.
if you're not a citizen. It is one of the many goals of the Rio Grande Foundation to at least try to drag New Mexico issues and policies and where we stand as a state into the national spotlight whenever we can.
Yeah, when you're a national news reporter or national news organization and you look at the data on the state of New Mexico, low child poverty, worst in the state, worst education in the state, and then you have a governor that says, you know what, free universal child care. You're like, oh, wow, that's amazing, because they don't know the state. All they know is the numbers. They look at the numbers, and then they look at a governor saying free universal child care, and then they're like, wow, look, we have a governor with a solution, and they don't even bother to even drive to the state or fly to the state to try to see what the real issue is on the ground floor. And
real quick,
yeah,
on that, not media specifically, but it is worth noting that Bernie Sanders of socialism in Vermont specifically took time to praise New Mexico's free childcare program. Now, Bernie, very left wing, of course, identifies as a socialist. Does he know already that New Mexico's providing this free childcare for people of 400% of the federal poverty level and under, which is more than double the median income in the state? I question what his knowledge base is, or if he's just got some staffer or saying, tweet something positive about New Mexico. And of course, up there in New York, the new mayor, Zoran Mondani in New York City, he is pushing for free universal child care as well. And of course, we made the comparison, I did, on the pages of National Review, that, New Mexico and Mondami, we're showing just how left-wing we are as a state by the ideas that we're, seeing moved places like New York under another avowedly socialist elected official. He's also been touting the free bus programs that are similar to those we have here in Albuquerque. Now, I will say that at least in New York City, because they don't have the oil and gas money and these permanent funds that provide like a little bit of a piggy bank or a subterfuge for the politicians in New Mexico to find pots of money that nobody really can account for. They're able to do things without as much accountability. But even a left-wing think tank up there in New York, the Fiscal Policy Institute, recently did an analysis of New Mexico's free childcare, and they were doing it to support Mondami and Kathy Hochul up in New York, and essentially said, yeah, New Mexico can do all this because they've got all these permanent funds and all this oil and gas money. In New York, you're going to have to raise taxes, not just on the rich, but on middle class New Yorkers. And it's just funny the way the lack of accountability is right here in New Mexico. Partially, I love what the oil and gas industry does, but the money that they send up to Santa Fe, I'd say 99 cents on the dollar, is either wasted or actively harms the standard of living of our citizens in New Mexico.
That's a bold claim there, Paul. 99 cents out of every dollar.
Well, these welfare programs, the Legislative Finance Committee has done study after study to show that what New Mexicans need, by and large, is a good job to work and get an education, and all of these welfare programs that are funded in many cases by oil and gas. And again, the industry is great. What it produces and does keeps my family warm in the wintertime, allows me to drive and go places, and helps the United States become energy independent. I'm just saying that the money, and whether it's oil and gas or any other money, our state is so poorly run. If we just had better national media outlets that would actually do a deep dive into New Mexico and see just how poorly this state is managed, I think even they would be surprised.
Yeah. So, considering that the legislative session, the 30-day session, is a budget session, right? It's just for the budget.
Uh-huh.
Every single thing that the state of New Mexico does can be tied to the budget, no matter what it is, right? So, do you know of any other priorities Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham has for this 30-day session besides like universal child care and passing a budget?
Well, she claims that she wants to do roads and improve our roads, which shockingly, as we've seen this oil and gas boom in Southeast New Mexico, it's not just Southeast New Mexico that's seen the roads deteriorate. We were recently listed in an article in the Santa Fe New Mexican, a national infrastructure organization, looked at road quality and found New Mexico to be third worst in the nation. Only Rhode Island and Hawaii had worse roads than New Mexico. I personally recently drove, and I-40 is one of the epicenters of our bad roads. I drove to Amarillo, Texas recently with my daughter, and if you were a blind person sitting in the front seat of my car, you could tell the moment we crossed over the Texas line, because suddenly the roads got much better, less noisy, less bumpy. You see semi-tractor trailers on I-40s on one of the biggest, most important roads in the entire country, swerving into different lanes in order to avoid the massive potholes on the New Mexico side of I-40. It is not just a problem for the vehicles that drive on these roads. It's a problem of public safety. And there's no way to tell how many people have lost their lives or been injured on, the medical malpractice people, rather than focusing on the doctors and suing them, should probably get out on the New Mexico highways, and they'd probably have ample opportunity to sue if the state was responsible for those roads. Unfortunately, they probably aren't responsible for them. But long story short, the governor threw in $100 million into her budget for roads, for one-time road expenses. The LFC put $155 million. I think that's better. It needs to be even more than that. We need to have a serious effort around road building and maintenance and improving infrastructure in our state. So the LFC is far superior in many ways to the governor's budget, but quite frankly, they don't go nearly as far enough. So that's another area, kind of budgetarily speaking, that is critical. The third area is not really a budget area, but I do expect it to be front and center on the agenda, which is the medical malpractice, medical provider shortage issue. And that's going to be a critical conversation this session.
I wanted to ask you about that. Actually, I'm a huge news nerd. I love local news. I watch and read all local news in the state of New Mexico. I spent almost 20 years in local news. I love the format. I love a Larry Barker piece where the money drops from the top of the TV. You know what I mean? I love the papers thrown on a table. I love the old school cheesiness of local news, man. Just embrace how cheesy it is because it's great, right? I love it.
Yep.
But so since I watch a lot of local news, that means that I also get a lot of the local ads, right? And that's where you want to know about local ads in your community. You do need to watch local news, right? Or CBS Sunday Morning especially. So medical malpractice, there's been an organization, I don't know the name of the group, that's been running ads already, encouraging people to call their legislatures in reference to medical malpractice, and so we can get this thing capped. The commercial actually says that it's like a man sitting in a hospital room, and he's talking to the doctor, and he's like, "Oh, that's great." And then the next scene, the doctor just disappeared, and he's still sitting on the bed.
Presbyterian. That's
Oh,
Presbyterian.
geez, you're right. That is Presbyterian. I remember I saw that.
They're a nonprofit, but they are, I think, if not one of the very biggest medical providers in the state of New Mexico. And in my case, I would say that those are effective ads on their face. No matter who's running them, they're well done. But for that to be done by one of the largest medical providers, an organization that, yes, they're political because they're tied to money and healthcare and politics and policies, but for them to be willing to kind of stick their necks out and say, this is a huge problem for us and for patients, and we need to do something about it now, that is absolutely incredible. So here's the way I see things panning out this session. So recently, State Rep Linda Trujillo, a Democrat, and Katie Duhigg, a senator and a trial attorney, both wrote an article in the paper saying that we were going to join the doctor compact this session. These compacts are across state lines. People can practice medicine. It's a good start. New Mexico's only been involved in the nursing compact. There's about 10 compacts across all different practice areas, EMS, dentists, dental hygienists, all these different groups, psychiatrists, social workers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they have said, well, we negotiated, we did all this kind of work behind the scenes, so New Mexico is probably going to join this compact this session. Wonderful. That's a nice start.
Okay.
They don't need to injure themselves, patting themselves on the back. This is something that's already been done in 42 other states. This is not rocket science. We should have been in these compacts a long, long time ago. And we need to, quite frankly, also join the other 8. But in New Mexico, progress comes slow. It is like pulling teeth. And these legislators are not really serious about, I think, taking the issue on wholeheartedly. Now, there's a lot that could be done. Gross receipts tax reform, broader tax reform to make New Mexico more attractive for higher earning people like doctors and medical providers. None of that's going to happen. Nothing's going to be done to solve the schools and address education quality because, of course, you spend, your 8 years in elementary school and junior high, you spend 4 years in high school, you spend college, and then you're doing 8 years of medical school. You are one of the more highly educated people walking the planet today. And you're going to move your family to a state that has the dead last worst education system in the entire country. Oh, and to boot, we have medical malpractice issues. We have crime issues. We have all these other challenges. So there's a reason, or many reasons, for our challenge of recruiting medical providers to the state of New Mexico. The wild card this session is medical malpractice reform and what that looks like if it's actually taken up. Now, this could be one of those examples. Johnny, you and I have talked about, I occasionally have kind words for the governor on this show, not because I like the governor at all, but because she occasionally does realize that what's been going on is not working. I have been told that she is pondering and having conversations with folks in the legislature about ways to address medical malpractice in this session. Will this happen? I don't know. I don't think the governor wants to come out, on her white horse and start talking about medical malpractice reform if the legislature is going to go tell her to jump in a lake. But we'll see. I have even heard that there could be a really interesting compromise. There's talk of addressing the gun rights issue. By addressing, I mean grabbing your guns. What do I mean by that? Well, in the last few years, there have been bills dropped in Santa Fe to make the gun sellers liable for crimes committed in the future with guns that they sell. I don't think this holds water. It's bad policy, but this is something that I have heard a rumor that could be a quid pro quo for the medical malpractice people, because if they can't sue doctors as a hobby, they could sue gun sellers as a hobby. Now, is that constitutional? There's all kinds of questions about this.
It could be a good trade-off temporarily. I mean, because it won't
especially if the courts
it won't pass the Constitution, right? Like, it's not constitutional. So, like, you get the trade-off, then you work your way through. Just like the 7-day waiting period was nullified for us as well, right?
Yep.
So, like, you pass it, you're like, yeah, I got my victory. So we get medical malpractice reform. They think they get their victory. 6 months, a year later down the courts, they don't have their victory.
Now, the trial attorneys know the law better than you and I do. Right. So they probably also see that eventuality. Maybe they don't. I don't know. These are not people I talk to on a regular basis. I do look at the trial attorneys and I say, in many ways, you have turned yourself into public enemy number one.
Yeah.
by creating this doctor shortage, ultimately. But on the other hand, they have suffered zero ramifications, and the Democratic Party has as well. There have not been massive efforts successfully undertaken to take out legislators who carry the water. Joe Cervantes down in Las Cruces, Peter Worth up in Santa Fe, the majority leader, in run-of-the-mill Democrats either. Who continue to vote for these people as leaders, especially Worth in the Senate. So there's a lot of moving parts. And of course, as you can probably imagine, the governor doesn't exactly come to me and share her thoughts on this, but this is some of the intelligence I'm receiving. And it'll be very interesting to see where, if anything, where this goes during the session and if anything actually happens. Because I do think the governor, yet another legacy issue, working to our benefit, does want to move the needle in a substantive way on the medical provider shortage. And if she can do that with medical malpractice reform in her last 30-day session, then I think she's going to take that opportunity. Question is the legislature, not the governor.
Right. I just think that if you're a lawmaker in this state, and I mean, you're being told every election cycle that you're doing something right. You're being told you're doing something right every session, every election cycle. You're like, okay, why would I want to? I mean, the people like what we're doing. I keep getting elected. We all keep getting elected. I'm not being told by the people, which we do govern. If we do govern, right? And if we vote, we govern by voting. We're telling them, the state is telling them they're doing a good job, basically.
Yeah, and we just saw this in the city of Albuquerque, and I know you're familiar with the politics up there, but by any objective standard, Mayor Tim Keller did a terrible job for 8 years as mayor of Albuquerque, and yet he won re-election in a runoff against the challenger, Darren White, 58-42. And we see the same kind of thing happening in the legislature. And I will always say, when push comes to shove, governors, as a general rule, and I dislike this governor for her COVID approach, number one, but overall, I would I would take the governor's politics over the average Democrat in the legislature's politics any day of the week. I think the governor, as she said several months ago, I want to do medical malpractice reform. This is before kind of we get to the rubber hit the road kind of thing. But she said, we have too many trial attorneys in the roundhouse. And she's clearly aware of the situation. She brokered a deal a few years ago on one aspect of medical malpractice reform. She clearly wants something to happen, but does she have the political capital? I mean, this could be just like the crime special session a few years ago, where essentially the legislature tells her, we don't want to do this, go jump in a lake. And I don't know. So I guess in summary, I'm more interested and excited about this legislative session than most, partially because of what I think are some very real differences of opinion between two aspects of the Democratic coalition, this governor and the legislators, especially the trial attorneys, but by no means just those legislators. Generally speaking, the Democrats in the legislature and the governor have some pretty sizable differences of opinion. We haven't talked about paid family leave. I don't know if that's on the agenda at all. I think with 30 days and with all these other issues, it's going to be tough to deal with that. I will say that on the data centers, Jeff Steinborn just dropped a bill to essentially put them back under the Energy Transition Act, which would chase all those data centers that are being considered
especially Project Jupiter.
I know there are significant issues with data centers, and they can solve some of those by creating these microgrids with natural gas, maybe SMRs, small modular reactors at some point in the future. The water situation can be solved with using produced water from the oil and gas industry. There are solutions to these problems, but the radical environmentalist mindset, Steinborn being one of them, Senator Jeff Steinborn, is anti-growth, anti-development. Again, the governor is trying to move the needle in a direction to have a legacy, but also these data centers are real jobs, real economic opportunities for New Mexicans. And I know two of them are slated for Southeast New Mexico, one Roswell, one Lee County, and then the other one over in Santa Teresa. And I know Facebook just said they're going to extend or expand their facility in Los Lunas. Is it the exact way we would do it at the Rio Grande Foundation? No. Are there problems? Yes, starting with the massive amount of electricity needed. But with the microgrids, you can build these facilities off the grid and won't impact our electricity usage at all. So going to be a real interesting session this year.
Right. Excellent. And then I'll also say that something that nobody knows, there are some discussions of a data center in Eddy County as well, which should not be too surprising considering that they're surrounding us and encircling us with data centers, essentially.
And to me, this is the best economic news. I mean, aside from the oil and gas boom that we've largely squandered, obviously there's still a boom to be had, but the budget numbers aren't where the legislature likes them. That's one of the reasons they're pushing back on the free childcare. If you or I were in charge, if we were governor and we could make some deals with the legislature, we could have cut taxes and really unleashed New Mexico's prosperity with that oil and gas revenue. We could have shored up our infrastructure, built roads, done work with the education. We could have transformed. You or I could have transformed New Mexico in the last 7-8 years. That's not this governor's mentality. It's not been that way. But I do think she's finally, in a lot of these issue areas, seen the writing on the wall and decided to do something, albeit imperfect, on some of these issues. And I'm not going to cry when I see her leave the state at the end of this year and the new governor comes in. I may cry if it's Deb Haaland coming in and being sworn in, but I've not seen eye to eye physically or mentally with this governor from day one. But I do think she's had a dose of reality given to her, and it's going to be an interesting session for a lot of those reasons.
All right. Well, Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, I really appreciate you coming on. We're definitely going to have you on maybe mid-session, after the session guaranteed. Go ahead.
Fantastic.
Go ahead and tout all of your all the places that people can learn about what you guys do. You didn't get a chance to talk about the Freedom Index, so let's have you close on where everybody needs to go.
Let's do that. Yes, the Freedom Index is where we track the legislation. Bills are already being pre-filed. They have been for a few weeks now. And we're tracking those, and those will be given point numbers, plus or minus, depending on their impact on New Mexicans and their financial impact on our state. So check out that Freedom Index, especially as those, we won't be assigning point totals until they hit the floor. So it'll take a week or so into the session for that to really start to look like something. Then heirsoфenchantment.com is our blog site. You can read recent articles I've written in the Albuquerque Journal. I had one recently on data centers as well. Tipping Point, New Mexico is our podcast. I've sat down and talked to most of the top level Republicans running for governor. I've talked to Ken Miyagishima as well on the Democratic side. Want to talk to Bregman. Talked to Michael Perry for land commissioner. He's an interesting guy. Talked to Steve Pierce recently about his new book and also some aspects of Republican Party politics and just the political situation in New Mexico. But Steve Pierce, I'm told his book is, I read his previous book, his Fly the Plane Stupid. This one I haven't gotten around to reading just yet, but he goes all the way around the world on a tiny little plane and does it for veterans and to bring attention to the people still suffering from the Vietnam War. And so we had a great conversation. So do check out Tipping Point, New Mexico. And I know you air an episode every single week of that show. So on your airways, but if you miss it, you can always go to our tippingpointnm.com website. So we're moving into the busiest time of the year, and I'm a little more excited than normal for it.
All right. Well, I mean, thank you very much, Paul, president of the Rio Grande Foundation.
You're listening to Community Forum on KCCC 930 AM, sponsored by Eddy County, honoring God, country, and family, thriving with industry since 1889.